My parents were in business together. And about 1946, my father was advised that it would be best for him, for his health, if they were to sell the business and do something different. They were dry cleaners. And so he got a job working for a company as a salesperson for chemicals. But what it meant was leaving the farm that my mother adored, that we had purchased and renovated. It was her dream house. And moving to Salem, Oregon. This is moving from Queensbury, New York to Salem, Oregon. I was 4 years old. It was 1947. My brother, Keith, was 10 years old. He's my date man. I always check with him. My brother Harm was 13. My sister Marilyn was 16. And we had an extremely large German Shepherd dog. But we fortunately had a 4-door sedan. With that, we proceeded to move across the United States. 4 children, is that right? 4 children, a big German Shepherd, and my mother and father. Much to my father's humiliation. He felt like we were kind of like the Okies coming the other direction, and a lot of times he wore a coat and a hat, so nobody would see him because we got stuff piled up in the car. Well, in those days there were no super highways, so it's kind of a long trip over, and especially with a lot of kids fighting in the back. As I recall, and I don't really have a lot of memory of it, I think that what we did is when we did come to a motel, we all kind of doubled up together, which was because we didn't have a lot of money. Well, we got to Yellowstone National Park, and he decided that he was going to really splurge. Part of the reason he wanted to splurge was he had not been alone with my mother for what seemed like 3 or 4 years. And this was a pristine atmosphere. So what he did was he rented a cabin for my brothers. My sister and I were going to have an adventure because she was 16. We were going to stay in the car. And he was going to be alone with Mom. I don't know. Maybe they were going to be reading poetry or whatever. What happens when you're 4. So he decided that he was going to check. And before he turned in for the night. And so he crept over to the cabin where my brothers were staying. And he listened, and what they were talking about was there had been bear warnings in Yellowstone. What would they do if a bear showed up? Well, they had all kinds of ideas. Now, one of the things I have to point out is my brother that was 10 years old had about 40 to 50 pounds on the brother that was 13 years old. That brother never got his growth spurt until his first year in college. Keith was always born big. Yeah. So they were talking about, well, we're going to do this and we'll do that, and I'll hit it over the head, and I'll do, they had all these kinds of things they do. So my father just couldn't resist it, so he started scratching at the window. Around to the door, scratching. Well, all hell broke loose. When he went back, he looked through the window. My brother that was 10 was up in the rafters of the cabin. And my brother that was 13, weighed probably about less than 100 pounds, was pushing the dresser against the door. Okay? And this is not a very long story because he had to spend the night with him. So the joke really backfired. And my sister and I got to spend the night in the cabin with my mother.